Hi, Roland. It's great to be here with you. Very exciting time to be talking about the space that you're involved in. And I was just thinking if we start off by saying, you're a very big company that kind of many people won't have heard of because you're in the background. So perhaps you could just tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So Adyen is a global payment company. What we do is we help companies accept payments from consumers worldwide. So for the likes of Facebook, Spotify, SoundCloud, Airbnb, what we do is we give them access to consumers in many countries all over the world and give them access to local payment methods that are important in those markets. So we help these companies process millions and millions of payments and we handle all of that for them.
So could you talk a bit about some of the numbers involved?
Yeah, so I think last year we processed about $25 billion in funds for our merchants. So that's actual money that goes through our systems. I think by now we're probably at about 33 billion run rate. 2013 we did 14, so that gives you a bit of a feel for the growth we're going through. So it's big numbers. I think we do about 2.5 million transactions a day, and it's growing very fast.
And you mentioned, because you're global, the way people make payments and attitudes towards making money are very different, aren't they? When you go around the world, say, in Germany, people don't like to use credit cards, so it's different in the UK, very different here. How different is the payment model, and how does that affect your business?
I think the way to look at it is that if you look at the cultural differences across the globe, you could almost copy that into the differences in payment behavior across the globe. So to give you a few examples, in the Netherlands and in Germany, people grow up and are taught to avoid credit wherever they can. I mean, I'm grown up, you never pay credit, you just don't do that, that's bad. So we try to pay wherever we can on the spot. If a lot of Dutch people, but also in Germany, will have their credit card locked away in a safe, and it will only come out when they go abroad. Now go to Brazil. So in Brazil, people do pay with credit cards, but what you find in Brazil is that only 30% or even less of all credit card payments can be handled internationally. To really handle payments in Brazil, you need to process them locally. And when you process credit cards locally in Brazil, 50% of all transactions are done in installments. And that means that if I'm buying a product for, let's say, 250 reais, I'm not paying in one go on my credit card. Now I'm paying in installments, so I might pay in 6 or 10 or 12 installments. So you end up that people in Brazil think about their credit balance, their spending limit, over a 12-month window. It's a completely different mindset, and that's evolved throughout decades with a lot of inflation. So in order to be successful in Brazil, you have to tap into that way of paying.
And because Brazil's obviously a huge market and one you must be really interested in, but what about China? What's the payments market like there?
It's a big market with a lot of interest. I think if you look at China, probably 1% or a few more of all payments are done with international credit cards. So what you end up seeing in China is that payments are done through Alipay, Tenpay, China Union Pay, and Alipay is the local wallet that supports a lot of the internet banking and debit card methods. Tenpay similar. Then China Union Pay is the domestic cards network. Those are really the ways to make payments. And again, we support those, make them available to our merchants through a single API.
Right. So traditionally, this has been an area that's been dominated by the banks, because they have the regulatory ties and the government connections that they've had for centuries. Like, so what's your relationships with them? Are you like at war with the JP Morgans and the UBSs of the world?
I think if you look at the payment space right now is super exciting because there's a lot of change going on. with a lot of new players. And the reason for that is that the payment space has been traditionally, for decades, been dominated by banks. So if any company, any merchant would want to accept payments from their consumers, they would go to their bank and sort it out. Now what you find within banks traditionally, interestingly enough, within banks you have a hierarchy. So the corporate banking side that does all the corporate lending, and they're the big boys. That's where a lot of money is being made. And then you have the different other activities, insurance, and then payments typically is on the bottom, somewhere down there,
right,
in the basements, in the cellars of the bank, because there's not a lot of money that typically banks make in payments. And it's always a cause for issues, because if the payment system is down, merchants are calling, complaining. So it's never been a sexy activity within the banking world. And when e-commerce started to happen, merchants wanted to go global. They had to start working with banks in all these different markets, because banks could only support and offer solutions in one market. So you had to talk to banks in every market, try to get connections going, super difficult and complex. And now what's going on is, there's new players that are tapping into that, and that's what we're doing. We're giving access to all these different markets through a single platform. And the next thing what we're doing is we're slowly pushing the banks out that value chain, because 5 to 10 years ago, for internet transactions, you would go to an internet payment company that would then go to a bank, who then go into Visa, MasterCard, or other payment methods. By now what you can do, we are direct members with Visa, MasterCard. So we're basically running the whole thing on one platform.
right.
So the merchant connects into us, we go straight to Visa, MasterCard, and we control it end to end, leading to easier integration, much more reporting and insight, one solution for all these markets. So you're seeing that technology is really taking over in the payment space. And then suddenly payments are no longer the looked down upon area that they used to be, but suddenly it's super global, it's fast moving and very exciting.
And are you more cost effective, do you think, than the banks? I mean, do you offer a better value proposition to merchants than the banks do at the moment?
Yeah, I think we offer quite a bit better value proposition, and the main reason is, again, in technology. So if you look at payments and the traditional infrastructure, big mainframe systems that are designed for point of sale, in-store payments, that you can hardly change. I mean, typically banks make an update to their platform once a year maybe, sometimes twice, and that's it. So it makes them very inflexible. By running this whole thing on very modern internet infrastructure, we can make changes all the time, every day, every week. And that means you can experiment much more. So you can say, hey, we think we might improve processes for merchants, giving them higher authorization rates, which is really key for these big companies, by making a few tweaks. We're not sure. Banks would never be able to experiment and do A/B testing. We can do it all the time. And that means that ultimately we can improve what we're doing, leading to higher authorization rates and therefore more revenues for our merchants.
Right. But it's very interesting what's going on with mobile payments now. I was thinking before we met about Uber and the way that they've just made mobile payments so seamless. I don't even think, sadly, I don't even think about it when I get in a cab now, and I just pay yet more money to Uber. I don't know what percentage of my salary it is now. It's probably rising by the minute.
Yeah.
But the way that mobile payments have changed everything. I mean, how do you see mobile payments developing, and how does that change what you do?
Yeah, it's interesting because I Ubered into the airport in San Francisco this morning twice. I arrived at the check-in counter at United, pulled out my wallet, gave them my ID card, but I'm Dutch, and in the US you have to give your passport, so I didn't bring my passport. So I rang my wife, who ordered another Uber, who went to the airport with my passport, and I made it. So it's changing our lives, it fixes problems. But I think in terms of payments, we see an enormous growth in mobile payment transactions. I think in the US, we do a quarterly mobile payments review in the company. We saw that, I think in the US, over the past year, 39% growth in mobile.
39% in the past year
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Wow.
The thing that you're seeing, I think what we are seeing, because we have such a wide merchant base, we have enormous amount of data on what's going on. And we work for a lot of the tech stars, but at the same time we also work with a lot of retailers. So we work with the likes of Adidas, with Under Armour, G-Star, that sort of retailers that are really moving more and more to a multi-channel commerce infrastructure. And I think what's going on now that people like you and me and many others are very used now to making very seamless payment transactions in the app. And you start to see that it's now becoming more and more used and implemented for traditional retailers. So what I think a trend will be, and we're seeing that with a lot of the retailers we're working with, is that they're running apps, they're starting to have their apps where you can do the similar type of transaction you're doing with Uber, but then more for retail products. So I think you're going to see that evolve and see more and more of that with more traditional merchants as well. Yeah.
And are you worried that there might be some, like we've seen incidents in banking and obviously with the NSA stories, etc. About, are you worried about there could be some event that could put people off using mobile payments, or do you see it as a kind of inevitability now, shift to mobile?
I think it's an inevitability. I don't think everybody's going to move on it within the next year everywhere, gradually, step by step. But no, it's happening. It's clearly happening, and I think you gotta. If you look at data, back in Europe, for example, people are very specific about their data. So you got to be, focusing on communicating well with your customers about what you're doing. If you're storing payment details, you need to be very clear about that. But as long as you do that, I think it's going to continue super fast.
And going back to that point earlier about cultural differences, do you think there are big differences in the way people are going to use mobile payments in different markets?
There will definitely be differences. I mean, if I look, for example, at Brazil, which is one of the key growth markets, all of the US customers we work with are focusing on launching locally now in Brazil. So not just taking payments there or transactions cross-border, no, really setting up locally, tapping into all the local payment types. So there's a lot of traffic there. But if I then look at what's the percentage of people making payments on their mobile in Brazil, it's below 10%. Right. Whereas in the UK, and this is across everything, right? So retailers, everything. In the UK, we're well up to 45 or something. So although it's it's a developing country, developing market, culturally people aren't ready for it there. They're really a few years back in time, but eventually it's going to grow.
And how about Apple's entry into the market? Do you think, does that change? And obviously the watch as well is very much kind of being positioned as a mobile payment system as well as the phone. Is their entry into the market change things for you?
I think it's going to drive a lot of change in the point of sale space. So what's really interesting, if you look at in the retail space, there's a theme, omni-channel. That's a big theme for every retailer, and it has been the biggest theme for the past 10 years, I would say. But people talk a lot about it, but to make actual changes in any retailer's infrastructure is super difficult. So everything is postponed and it takes a lot of time. Every meeting I have nowadays with a retailer, they're not asking me only about these e-commerce solutions we have, the mobile payment solutions they have. They want to talk about point of sale as well. How can we help them bring a technology-driven solution in their point of sale? Because they want to see much more data about their customers in store and combine it with what's going on in the online channels. And things like Apple Pay that are now coming to the market are really helping drive that change. Because people have been talking about that change for a long time, but now they have something, I want to have Apple Pay. When it launches, I got to be ready. So we're seeing now really an acceleration of the changes going on in retail stores, which means there will be much more going on there the coming years because people are now making that change, which means more local offers, more recognition, more loyalty.
So we got Facebook talking about it too, and Google. I think that's just going to hasten the movement.
Yeah, so I think once Apple Pay is a success, people want it. It's opening the door for companies like Google to do the same. It's helping us, and we are very much focused. People have known us for a very fast-growing player in the e-commerce space and mobile, but we're actually also very much focused on helping merchants with their in-store payments. And ultimately, where we want to be in 2 years' time is that for big retailers, we don't do only their online and e-com transactions. We want to do everything. Everything through a single platform, one reporting interface, and things like Apple Pay are really helping us make those changes going. So we're welcoming it. Yeah.
Do you think we'll ever move to a cashless society then? Are we going to be able to get rid of these bundles of dollar bills? And if you said you lived in England before. £2 coins weigh about £1, don't they?
I lived in England before, and when I lived there, I had, the piling of cash of coins. I now live in San Francisco, and again I have, the jelly jars full of coins. I mean, it's. I'd love it to happen soon, and I think it will. But it's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to happen in 2-3 years. But 10 years from now, I think it's done.
Yeah. And is Bitcoin part of that, do you think? Do you think we could see a kind of global currency, something Bitcoin or something similar to that?
It might be, I don't know. I mean, I think, especially a problem that needs fixing is international payouts. So if you want to send me money, I have a bank account in the Netherlands, you're here in the US, that's hard. That's very hard. And that's what I found living in the UK, living in the US, being Dutch. It's really difficult transferring funds. We have IBAN, we have SEPA, but that's still super difficult. And that's between really well-developed countries. So we have a lot of global customers that don't want to talk only about their consumers paying them. No, we're also talking about, hey, how can we pay people in countries? For the sharing economy, and then how are you going to pay a guy out in Colombia? How are you going to pay a guy out in Malaysia? That's difficult. So I think that's an area where these new infrastructures can really help make things more seamless. I think,
Is that something you have to do at the government level, though? I mean, obviously, a lot of those barriers are regulatory. The US doesn't want you sending money to Iran, so there's plenty of other countries on the banned list. And it's like you say, it's not even easy to send money from the UK to the US all the time. So does that have to happen at a government level?
I think there needs to be a discussion. I think what's helped in Europe, and it's taken years and years and years, but by now in Europe we have what's called SEPA, and that basically means that we now have one standard to do, on the one hand, bank transfers within Europe. So it's now much easier for me from the Netherlands to send money to someone to Germany. And that's been arranged on a government level. So definitely there's a role to play. I think, the government needs to focus in these regions to make commerce easier. And this is one thing, and there's much more to do, I guess.
So you've reached last question, but you've just recently moved to San Francisco. Now, why did you decide you needed to be in the Bay Area? Your headquarters still in Holland. What difference is that making for the company, and what are your future plans?
So as a company, we have 10 offices worldwide. So we're started in the Netherlands, but San Francisco is really the second hub for the company. More than half of all traffic we do as a business originates from US-based customers. So our growth here is huge. I moved here to help grow that San Francisco office. We're looking to hire many more people there, and that's really been driving that. It's the growth market for us.
IPO?
Who knows?
Well, thank you very much. It's great to meet you.
Right.
Well,
Thanks.